It was a night that started like so many others, a lively campus buzzing with the energy of young students, laughter echoing through the streets, and music spilling out of Reggie's Bar, a popular hangout just steps from Louisiana State University. Inside, 19-year-old Madison Brooks danced with friends, her golden hair catching the neon lights as she celebrated the freedom of youth. Bright, bubbly, and full of life, Madison was the kind of person who left an impression wherever she went. But in the early hours of January 15, 2023, that same vibrant energy was extinguished forever. A passing car on Burbank Drive, an anxious 911 call, and a body lying broken on the cold pavement. It was the shocking end to a story that had only just begun. What happened between the laughter and the headlights? Why was Madison, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, left abandoned on a dark road, far from the safety of her friends? And how did the events of that night spiral into a case that would grip the nation with its revelations of betrayal, neglect, and unimaginable tragedy? Join as we uncover the truth behind the party night that changed everything. Madison Brooks wasn't just a victim of circumstance, she was failed by the very people she trusted most. This is her story, the decisions, the heartbreak, and the haunting questions that remain unanswered. Stay with us, as we piece together the fragments of Madison's final hours and explore the chilling reality of what really happened that night. Madison Brooks was the kind of young woman who seemed to have it all. Born and raised in Louisiana, she was full of life, ambition, and kindness. As a sophomore at Louisiana State University, Madison was studying to build a future that matched her bright personality. She was a member of Alpha Phi sorority, known for her laughter, generosity, and the way she could light up a room. To her friends and family, she wasn't just Madison, she was the heart of their world, a daughter, a sister, and a friend who would drop everything to help someone in need. But on January 14, 2023, everything changed. It was a Saturday night like any other in Baton Rouge. The campus hummed with weekend energy as students flocked to their favorite hangouts. For Madison, that meant Reggie's Bar, a popular spot just minutes from LSU's campus. The neon lights, the crowded dance floor, the laughter, this was her scene. Surveillance footage from that night captured Madison entering the bar with friends, a typical college evening full of promise and fun. But by the early hours of January 15, the picture was starkly different. Madison's body was discovered on Burbank Drive near Pelican Lakes Parkway. She had been struck by a vehicle after being abandoned on the side of the road. The driver, who stayed on the scene, was not impaired and called for help. But it was too late. Madison was rushed to the hospital, where she succumbed to her injuries. Her blood alcohol content was later revealed to be 0.319%, nearly 4 times the legal limit. As investigators pieced together her final hours, a disturbing story began to emerge. Surveillance footage revealed Madison leaving Reggie's Bar with 4 individuals, Kyvon Washington, Everett Lee, Kaysen Carver, and a 17-year-old whose name remains undisclosed. What happened during those hours, and why Madison never made it home, would send shockwaves across the nation. This case was unlike any other. It wasn't just a story of a tragic accident. It was a puzzle of trust broken, decisions made in the shadows, and a devastating betrayal that no one saw coming. The more details surfaced, the harder it became to comprehend the reality of Madison's final moments. Who were the people she left with? What role did they play in her fate? And why was Madison, a young woman full of promise, abandoned on a dark road, left vulnerable to the unthinkable? These questions gripped the nation, turning Madison Brooks' story into one of the most heartbreaking and controversial cases of our time. Her name became a symbol of justice sought, and her story became a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of human behavior. Stay with us as we unravel the truth behind Madison's final night, the choices, the betrayals, and the heartbreaking consequences that left a community shattered. When the first responder arrived on Burbank Drive in the early hours of January 15, 2023, the scene was one of chaos and confusion. Madison Brooks lay severely injured, her body broken but still clinging to life. The driver who struck her was distraught but cooperative, immediately calling 911 and explaining that Madison seemed to have come out of nowhere in the darkness. As the investigators worked to piece together what had happened, their first task was to answer a troubling question: why was Madison, a young woman with friends and a support network, alone on this desolate stretch of road? The initial investigation began at Reggie's bar, where Madison had been seen just hours before. Surveillance footage showed her visibly intoxicated, stumbling as she tried to make her way out of the bar. Witnesses described her as cheerful but unsteady, clearly under the influence. Outside the bar, cameras captured her leaving with 4 individuals: Kyvon Washington, Everett Lee, Kason Carver, and a 17-year-old male. At first, the group's story seemed straightforward. They claimed they had offered Madison a ride because she was too drunk to get home safely. But as investigators dug deeper, inconsistencies began to emerge. One of the most critical breakthroughs came from Kason Carver, who told police that Madison was so intoxicated she could barely speak coherently during the ride. He admitted to hearing disturbing noises from the back seat, where Kyvon Washington and the 17-year-old were seated with Madison. Carver claimed he was uncomfortable but didn't intervene, a detail that would haunt investigators and the public alike. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, a disturbing timeline began to emerge. Madison had allegedly been sexually assaulted by 2 members of the group while others sat idly by. Once the assault was over, the group decided to drop Madison off, not at her home, but on the side of a dark suburban road, far from safety. In those moments, her fate was sealed. Left alone and disoriented, Madison wandered into the street, where she was struck by a passing car. The theories surrounding Madison's death initially varied. Could it have been a tragic accident? Was there an altercation at the bar? Did she willingly leave with the group, or was she coerced? Each possibility led to dead ends, but one thing was becoming clear: this was no ordinary tragedy. As the investigation unfolded, the emotional toll on Madison's family and friends was immeasurable. Her mother, distraught and seeking answers, described her daughter as the light of our lives. Friends remembered her as someone who was always there to lend a hand or share a laugh. Candlelight vigils were held across Baton Rouge, with hundreds gathering to honor Madison's memory and demand justice. Audio from the 911 call added another layer of heartbreak. The driver's voice, shaking with panic, recounted the moment he struck Madison, unable to stop in time. The recording painted a vivid picture of a young life cut short in a moment of despair and isolation. The public's response was immediate and impassioned. Social media lit up with calls for accountability, while local activists demanded stricter measures to prevent underage drinking and protect vulnerable young women. The spotlight turned toward Reggie's bar, whose liquor license was swiftly suspended as investigators probed deeper into the events of that night. The tragedy of Madison Brooks was no longer just a local story, it was a national reckoning, a case that exposed the fragility of trust, the consequences of neglect, and the devastating cost of betrayal. But the truth was still unraveling, and with every new detail, the tension only grew. What really happened in the car that night? And why did no one step in to stop it? The answers were as shocking as they were heartbreaking. As the nation mourned the loss of Madison Brooks, the question of what really happened in her final hours became the focus of intense speculation. Was her death a tragic accident? Or was there something more calculated at play? At first, the case appeared straightforward. Some argued it was a cruel twist of fate, an intoxicated young woman left to fend for herself, struck by a driver who couldn't have anticipated her presence on the road. Others weren't so sure. How had Madison ended up alone on that dark stretch of Burbank Drive? And why would the group she left with abandon her in such a vulnerable state? Public theories began to swirl. On social media, armchair detectives dissected surveillance footage, analyzed timelines, and speculated about the motives of the individuals in the car. Was it possible there had been an argument that escalated? Or did someone intentionally leave her in harm's way? The internet lit up with discussions, many pointing to the bar and the group of young men who were last seen with her. The first major breakthrough came when Kaysen Carver, one of the 4 individuals in the car, agreed to cooperate with investigators. His statement revealed a harrowing account of what occurred after the group left Reggie's bar. According to Carver, Madison was in no condition to consent to anything, let alone make decisions for herself. He described hearing disturbing sounds from the back seat and feeling deeply uncomfortable but claimed he didn't intervene. This testimony cast a harsh light on the actions, or inactions, of everyone involved. Investigators focused on Kyvon Washington and the 17-year-old, who were both accused of sexually assaulting Madison while the others remained silent. DNA evidence would later corroborate these claims, providing a pivotal piece of the puzzle. With this evidence, the investigation shifted from a question of negligence to one of criminal intent. Why didn't anyone step in to help Madison? And why was she left on the side of the road instead of being taken to safety? These were questions that investigators sought to answer as they dug deeper into the group's alibis. As the case unfolded, inconsistencies in the group's stories began to emerge. Initially, all 4 claimed they were trying to help Madison get home. But their actions told a different story. Surveillance footage showed the group stopping the car briefly before leaving Madison on Burbank Drive. Phone records revealed gaps in their communication during critical moments of the night, raising suspicions about whether there had been a coordinated effort to conceal the truth. Forensic evidence played a key role in solidifying the case. Toxicology reports confirmed Madison's blood alcohol content was dangerously high, rendering her incapable of making decisions or defending herself. Physical evidence from the scene also pointed to her state of disorientation. But the most damning discovery was the DNA evidence linking both Kyvon Washington and the 17-year-old to Madison. These revelations were a turning point in the investigation. What had initially been seen as a tragic accident now bore all the hallmarks of a calculated betrayal. Arrest warrants were issued for the suspects, and charges ranged from third-degree rape to negligence. As these developments unfolded, the media frenzy intensified. The public demanded accountability, not just for Madison but for a system that allowed such events to unfold. Reggie's bar became a lightning rod for criticism, with many blaming its lax policies on underage drinking and overcrowding. The bar's liquor license was suspended, and its role in the events of that night came under heavy scrutiny. Through painstaking detective work, law enforcement had pieced together a narrative that was as heartbreaking as it was infuriating. Madison's death wasn't just an accident, it was the result of a series of decisions made by people who should have protected her but instead left her vulnerable. But even as arrests were made and charges filed, one question remained: would justice for Madison Brooks ever truly be served? The case had uncovered the ugliest sides of human behavior, and the road to accountability was far from over. After months of painstaking investigation, the truth behind Madison Brooks' tragic final night began to emerge. With DNA evidence, witness testimony, and forensic findings, a chilling narrative was pieced together, leading to the arrest of 4 individuals who had been with Madison in her final hours. Kyvon Washington, Everett Lee, Kaysen Carver, and a 17-year-old juvenile faced varying charges ranging from third-degree rape to negligence. The most damning evidence came from Kyvon Washington and the juvenile, whose DNA was directly linked to the assault. Their claims of innocence unraveled under scrutiny, as investigators presented irrefutable evidence of their involvement in Madison's final hours. In the courtroom, emotions ran high. Madison's family sat through gut-wrenching testimonies, hoping for justice for their daughter. The suspect's defense teams attempted to cast doubt, arguing that the events were consensual. But Madison's blood alcohol level, a staggering 0.319%, and the testimony from Kaysen Carver painted a grim picture. Madison was in no condition to consent, let alone comprehend what was happening to her. Ultimately, the justice system took its course. Kyvon Washington and the juvenile were charged with third-degree rape, and the community hoped for convictions that would bring some semblance of closure. However, the legal process was far from over, and the drawn-out nature of the case left many wondering if true justice could ever be achieved. Yet, even as the arrests brought a sense of resolution, lingering questions haunted the case. Why didn't anyone in the group intervene? Why was Madison left on the side of the road instead of being taken to safety? These unanswered questions cast a shadow over the case, leaving the public divided about who bore the ultimate responsibility for Madison's death. Then, a final twist came to light. Investigators uncovered that Reggie's bar, the last place Madison was seen alive, had a history of violations, including serving alcohol to minors. This revelation sparked outrage, leading to the suspension of the bar's liquor license and renewed calls for stricter regulations on establishments serving alcohol near college campuses. The impact of Madison's case was felt far beyond Baton Rouge. Her death ignited nationwide conversations about the dangers of underage drinking, consent, and the moral responsibility we all bear in protecting vulnerable individuals. It also highlighted the devastating consequences of bystander inaction, reminding us that sometimes, the choice to do nothing can be as damaging as the crime itself. Madison's family vowed to keep her memory alive. Through their advocacy, they pushed for legal reforms and greater awareness, ensuring that no other family would have to endure the heartbreak they experienced. Today, while the legal proceedings continue, Madison Brooks' story remains a powerful reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of standing up against wrongdoing. Her case is a call to action, a plea for accountability, compassion, and a commitment to ensuring that tragedies like this never happen again. As we close, we leave you with this question: could more have been done to save Madison? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story compelling, subscribe to our channel for more in-depth true crime stories that aim to bring justice to light. And stay tuned, because our next story will uncover another case that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew. Thank you for watching, and remember, every story deserves to be told.